Jeremiah here with Palm Air Condition. Title of the video today is going to be the power of a full diagnostic. Behind me on the wall you'll actually see a blown up version of what we use here at Palm Air. This is given to all of our maintenance and service technicians, even our installers. This is what they use for their full startup after installing new equipment into the home. We're going to discuss what's all on our diagnostic sheet, as well as why it's important, and then I'm going to list pros and cons for the diagnostic itself. We're going to start there actually with the pros and the cons. I'm going to start with the cons. I didn't really think there was too many of those, but I'll go ahead and just get those out there and out of the way before we get started. First con, it takes a little extra time. I'm not going to lie, guys, for the amount of information we're asking you to get here. It does take a little bit extra time, and we do require you to have a couple of specialty tools in order to get all of these numbers. I'll go ahead and just talk about those really quickly, and then we'll move on to the rest of the cons and pros. A couple of specialty tools you're going to need outside of the normal gauges, meters, and hand tools. You'll also need a digital psychrometer of some sort. I guess you could use a sling psychrometer. However, I'm going to be asking you to get me dry bulb and wet bulb of both the supply and the return. So a probe style digital psychrometer works a lot better. I personally use a field piece dual induct psychrometer. I don't remember the model number offhand. However, the reason I like that is I'm able to get supply and return at the same time. It also gives me a few extra functions that your typical psychrometer doesn't give you. Not that I couldn't get to that result with just a little bit of math and a small equation. However, it's nice to take the guesswork out of it and have it done for me. So I'll tell you the 5 things I believe that my psychrometer can do. It's going to do dry bulb temperature, no different than any other thermometer or thermostat. It's going to do wet bulb temperature, which is the temperature you feel like when you're wet, but it lets me know how much moisture is in the air, and then from there you can actually derive a humidity reading, which is my next reading that it does. It does a relative humidity percentage reading, and then it's going to do an enthalpy reading. Enthalpy, guys, is total heat, so that's going to go ahead and take into consideration the sensible heat that we can actually read on a thermometer. And as I say these words, guys, I'm going to go ahead and clarify a little bit more for anyone who doesn't understand what I'm talking about. But when I say sensible heat, I'm actually talking about the number you read on a thermometer or on a thermostat. Okay, that's the actual amount of sensible heat, meaning we can actually sense it. Okay, above and beyond that, guys, you've got total heat. So there's additional heat in that air in the form of water vapor and thermal energy that isn't recorded on a thermostat. Okay, so that's sensible heat. And the other one I'm talking about is latent heat. Latent heat is, again, the additional humidity that's in that air that actually adds a heat load to the space. Down here in South Florida, we have to pay very, very close attention to what our humidity levels are. It can get out of control pretty quickly if you're not careful down here in South Florida. So something to keep in mind while you're doing that. The other tool you're going to need if you're going to be able to give me a full diagnostic is going to be a manometer or a magnehelic. That's going to measure total static pressure. For those of you, again, that aren't familiar with what static pressure is, air inside of a duct system actually pushes in all directions, and it creates a force that can actually be measured with a manometer or a magnehelic. Once again, I use a dual port manometer. This way I can get supply and return at the exact same time. That gives me total external static pressure on my equipment. Once I have that, I can go ahead and isolate the supply side from the return side to determine if this is equal static on both sides, or if one side has a restriction, one side isn't big enough, one side is too big. I'm able to figure that out from there, and then I can actually take that and plug that into once I've got dry bulb and wet bulb, there's actually several equations where I can go ahead and figure out how many BTUs we're removing, actually get full cooling capacity of the equipment, and just really tell the full story of the equipment, make sure that we know exactly what's happening with the unit. The other con that I've got written down here is it's more writing, right? We don't have this digitally yet. Even if you do, you still have to type those values into your phone. So again, it takes a little extra time, and it causes you to have to write a little bit more. And the last con I had is it requires some specialty tools. Those specialty tools aren't necessarily expensive, but it's definitely more investment that you have to actually put into yourself, guys. But I always tell my guys, you're only as good as your tools. Make sure you trust your tools, and quality is actually, you have to be able to trust your tools. So make sure you're buying quality while you're out there. Maybe I'll do another video down the road of just some of the different types of tools that we actually use in the different brands that are out there and what their functions and features are. So those are my cons, guys. 3 cons. Takes a little extra time. There's more riding and requires some what some might consider more expensive specialty type tools. Now we're going to get into the pros, guys. I've got a laundry list of these, and as I go through each one, we'll go ahead and talk about why I believe that that's true. First pro I have on there is it keeps you organized. As you can see behind you, we've already set it up. It's in process. It gives a picture here of the refrigeration cycle. So if you ever kind of forget where the refrigerant is or what state it's supposed to be in various locations of the system, it gives you that here. I don't have it here on the wall, but on the back of our actual paper diagnostics that we give our techs here at Palm Air, there's actually a few formulas on the back of that to help them figure out some of these, to actually take these numbers and put them into a real life situation and actually come up with some real values. We'll talk about that as we go through what's on the diagnostic. The next pro I have is it keeps you on track. Again, it's very easy to get sidetracked when you're looking at this many different things at the same time, especially considering that each one of these sort of work together to give you the full picture of what's happening. If you don't have it all in one place, it's very easy to get sidetracked on, hey, what was my subcool? What was my superheat? What was my CFM? And this here keeps you organized. Make sure it's all in one place. You can easily look to it and help you determine what's going on with the system, as well as if you did need some help, you could easily rattle these numbers off to me over the telephone and I can help. All right. The next one I have is it aids in troubleshooting. Once again, guys, having this all in one place is your roadmap, if you will, to success with air conditioning and actually keep making sure that you come to the right diagnostic at the end of the call. It also allows us as a company to track a system over time. So we do these, if you're a Palm Air client and you're doing annual maintenance with us, our standard annual maintenance is 2 times a year. So at least twice a year we're coming out and we're completing a full diagnostic on your equipment. We keep those in your file, and over time I'm able to see if your discharge pressure is slowly creeping up or slowly creeping down. Why might it creep up? Well, that could be because your condensing coil is getting dirty or corroded, and it's limiting the amount of air and heat exchange that can happen. And then over time, we'll see the head pressure rise. Or vice versa, you've got a leak and it's slowly leaking out. Maybe it's just a pinhole leak that it isn't flagged on the very first diagnostic, but 6 or 7 diagnostics later, all of a sudden we see a suction pressure that's now outside of the range of normal, and we're able to see that, hey, this has actually been happening slowly over the last 2-3 years, and that really makes sure that customers understand that this isn't something that just happens like that. Sometimes it is a slow progression, and because there's so many variables out there and just variances just within one technician's tool to the next, that there is a little bit of a play and sort of what do you call it?
12 by 12 by...
I'm sorry, but a bit of a buffer, if you will, or a time when we can actually track how this is. Right, I'm back. Sorry about the hiccup there. I accidentally hit the remote shutter, so we'll set that down so that doesn't happen again. We were talking about actually using this as a tracking tool over time with the customer. We're able to show that this isn't something that just happened from the last maintenance we were here. This is something that's happened progressively or slowly over time. So we're able to show that with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these in a row over each time, separated by 5 or 6 months. So the other thing is it produces good habits, guys. It's good habit no matter if the system is operating correctly or not, or there isn't. And perhaps you go to a customer house and you ask them how the air conditioner is working, and they say, "Oh, everything's perfect. It's fantastic. It's the best air conditioning system I've ever had. Thank you so much for putting it in my home." Well, it is still a good habit to make sure that you're checking every single one of these so that that system remains the best system they ever had, and it remains operating at its peak efficiency for the life of the system, or at least as close to that as we can get it. So again, this promotes good habits to make sure that we are always doing what we're supposed to be doing while we're out there. What does a diagnostic mean to a customer? I kind of stated this earlier. At the end of the day, the customer may or may not know what these numbers mean, but to them, it shows that we did our job. So if I've got 5 numbers on here and the other 18 numbers are blank, well, then the customer's going to say, well, what did he actually do? Or what else didn't he do if he didn't do the diagnostic like you're supposed to while we're out here? So it's important, guys, that we get as much of this diagnostic filled out as we can every single time that we're out on a call. Like I said, customers going to be looking for this for a few different reasons. One, it's going to prove the tech did everything that he was supposed to do. 2, it's going to build value. 3, it's going to show that the tech, well, he knows his craft, he knows what he's doing. He's able to fill this out in a timely fashion. They're going to be impressed. It's also going to show his commitment to neatness. Guys, it's very, very important that we take our time on these diagnostics. If and when a customer does want to go back and read them, or your service manager would like to go back and read your diagnostic, it would be nice to actually be able to read what you've written there. So take your time when you're writing, make sure you're nice and neat. How you write on a piece of paper is actually going to translate into whether or not you're being neat in the customer's home or with their equipment. Are you doing everything you're supposed to do? Well, this is going to give them a little bit of peace of mind that you are. Again, even if a customer doesn't understand, on here we've got compressor amp draw rated and compressor amp draw actual. So it's kind of nice to be able to do that in a couple of different places on the condenser fan motor, the evap fan motor, and the compressor, so that even if they don't understand, they're able to say, okay, well, this is what it's supposed to be, and this is what it is. And they can say, okay, well, I'm not over my rated value, or I'm not too far under my rated value. So at very least, even with a limited amount of knowledge, just being able to see what it's actually rated for and what it actually is a big help for the customer as well. I'm just going to take a few minutes. We're going to go through what's actually on our diagnostic here, and I'll give a little bit of information if necessary on each one of those. Up top over here, we've just got a place. Of course, we'll start up here. So this is just our customer information. Once again, keeps us organized. Make sure that this goes into the right file, as well as oftentimes we're in customers' homes that have multiple system houses. So they might have 2, 3, 4, 5 systems in their one house. And this makes sure that we know which area each one services. So when we talk about area unit services, what we're looking for here is master bedroom, living room, kitchen area, upstairs, downstairs, just some sort of brief description of what area of the home that system is actually servicing. Over here I've got condensing unit model, air handler unit model, as well as condensing unit serial and air handler serial. From the serials, we can determine age. All manufacturers use some sort of nomenclature code, and each digit in that serial number actually means something different. One may mean the month, one may mean the year, as well as where it was manufactured, etc. So there's a lot of information within the serial number which can help the manufacturer in a warranty situation, or us determining what recommendations we should make depending on age, and etc. Over here is voltage. Voltage, again, is important to know. You want to make sure that your transformers are set to the right voltage. So most of the time we're in residential homes and it's 240 volts or somewhere in that range. But it is nice to know that they have that. On a rare occasion, you'll get into an area or a neighborhood where the voltage is high or low. Either way, they can affect the systems in different ways. Especially with some of our newer systems that are using DC communicating voltage, that'll change that DC bus, the low voltage side of the equipment, and so it's important to know. There's also very, very specific manufacturer requirements for voltage, so that's something to be aware of as well. The next section here, we call this the heating mode. What we're asking for there, guys, is we're looking for a amp draw from the actual heater. Down here in South Florida. We don't see really any furnaces, to be quite honest. We do see a few heat pumps, but not too many furnaces, none at all, to be honest. And so most of what we're dealing with when we're talking about heating is actually just resistance electric style heater. So we just need to know the amp draw off of that heater, as well as your total watts. Again, on the back of this, it would actually give you a formula for how you do that. It's a very, very simple math equation. You're just basically taking your amp draw and you're timesing it by 3.4 to give you your total watts. Oh, I'm sorry. I actually skipped a step. Amps times volts is going to give you watts. So once you've known your voltage and your amperage times voltage is actually going to give you your watts. Your watts times 3.4 will give you your total BTU input in heating. Again, those formulas are on the back of our diagnostic, and we'll do another video to dive into each one of those formulas when we use it and why. But using that, as well as getting a entering air dry bulb and a leading air dry bulb, so by knowing my amperage, my voltage, my entering air dry bulb, and my leading air dry bulb, with a couple of math equations, we're actually able to come up with a total blower CFM output. That, guys, just so you're aware, can vary from system to system. If the system was just in cooling mode and you're testing the heat, there's still water on the evaporator coil, your numbers can be a little skewed. You will have some evaporative cooling as the air moves across that coil, which would cool the air a little bit, so you may skew your number a little bit. This works best on the very first day that the unit's put in, when we know we have a dry coil and it hasn't been ran. We're going to get a true air temperature. I personally like to leave the top panel open when I'm doing this, to sort of have most of my air coming straight into the air handler, as opposed to going through my coil. It gets me a little bit closer on my number, but it is a way to determine CFM. Another way to determine CFM, guys, I'm just going to put it out there since we're speaking. Most manufacturers have an airflow data sheet of some sort, and you can actually take and compare static pressure of the equipment to the setting and come up with an airflow, at least a ballpark airflow in that range. The next section is a much larger section. It's our cooling mode section. Okay, we're going to get total condensing unit amp draw. Again, we're going to get the compressor amp draw, what's actually happening in the compressor versus what the manufacturer says the rated amperage should be. We're going to do outdoor ambient temperature, outdoor ambient air temperature. Okay. We're going to go ahead and then get discharge pressure. Discharge pressure is going to correlate to a saturation temperature on your gauge. You're going to then take a liquid line temp, and that's going to, and once you are able to compare these two numbers together, we'll do again one small math equation, and we'll be able to get subcooling. So your condensing temperature should be slightly higher than whatever your liquid line temperature. Most units these days are looking for somewhere between 8 and 15 degrees of subcool, give or take. But most of the time, right on the data log, you can actually, right on the data tag of the unit, it'll give you a specific number. 8, 9, 10, like I said, anywhere up to about 15 degrees. Then we move on to the low side of the system, the suction pressure. We get a suction temperature, a suction pressure. Then we're going to get a saturated suction temperature. Again, how do I get a saturated suction temperature? It's on your gauge itself. So the outside number of your gauge, I won't have a set of gauges with me, but the outside number of your gauge is your pressure, or your PSIG, gauge pressure. If you follow that number down, so you follow your needle down into whatever refrigerant you happen to be using, it's usually color-coded. So 410A would be pink, R22 would be green, so on and so forth. You take your saturation temperature, you write that number down, and then once again, you're going to get a temperature of your suction line, which if you're not sure where it is, here's my evaporator. My suction line runs between my compressor and my evaporator. So if I'm out at my condensing unit, I'd be out the larger line just outside of that unit. You get that suction temperature. Once again, you're going to compare it to your saturation temperature. In this case, it's actually going to be warmer. So let's say we had a 40-degree saturation temperature and a 55-degree line temperature. That would give us a 15-degree superheat. Okay. The next item we're looking for on our diagnostic is a indoor total static pressure. That's measured in water columns, for those of you that are aware. Once again, I told you in the very beginning of this video, either a manometer or a magnehelic is what we use to get that number. You'll write that number here, and we can use that against the equipment data to make sure that we're within range for static. total CFM, which we got up here, we can write down here. Again, that's just to keep us on track and organized. And then down here, you've got some air temperatures. Entering air dry bulb, entering air wet bulb, entering air, leaving air dry bulb from the supply air temperature, leaving air wet bulb from the supply temperature. So that's a dry bulb and a wet bulb of the return air, and a dry bulb and a wet bulb of the supply air. It also has a spot here where we can put our filter size, as well as a total system BTU cooling capacity. We can put that there. Guys, diagnostics are important. It's part of our job, first and foremost. And second of all, it's a tool that we have available to us to keep us on track. I would ask that each one of us are utilizing this as often as we possibly can and bringing the best possible result to our customers. Thank you for your time. Jeremiah, signing out.